My name's Linda Greer, and I've spent my life teaching children how to believe in themselves. Yet somehow, I missed the lesson when it came to me. At my father's retirement party, he handed my entire future to my brother with a smile, then turned to me and said, "Teaching's not a real profession anyway." That was the moment I realized I'd never been seen, not really, and I knew something in me had to change. Before I share the moment that flipped my world upside down, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing how far stories like mine travel, especially when they start in places as small as a backyard in suburban Denver. It was supposed to be a celebration. My dad's retirement, a cool September evening, fairy lights strung from tree to tree, jazz floating from the speakers, every detail curated by my mom to mark the end of an era. People mingled with wine glasses and memories, laughter bubbling like champagne. But somehow, in the middle of the clinking glasses and polite toasts, I vanished. I wasn't even 3 bites into my chicken salad when Dad stood up to make his speech. He tapped his fork to the rim of his wineglass, the old-fashioned way, commanding the attention of the 30 or so people who'd gathered to honor him. My brother, Jake, had just returned from a golf trip in Scottsdale, still tan and smug in his designer polo. He lounged beside our father, the golden child in every sense. Dad cleared his throat. "I want to thank everyone for being here today. It means the world to me and to Jake, who'll be taking the reins of Greer Contracting starting Monday." There it was, the handoff. The announcement we all knew was coming, but hearing it still punched the breath out of me. "He's got the brains for the business, the grit. Always has," Dad continued. "Reminds me of myself at his age. That's why I trust him with the company." As for Linda, well, she teaches kindergarten, bless her heart. A few chuckles. And then, "Teaching's not a real profession anyway, but I guess someone's gotta wrangle the little ones." The laugh that followed was sharp and ugly, bouncing off wine glasses and patio stones. I blinked. Once, twice. My fork hovered in midair. I didn't look at Jake, didn't have to. I could feel the smirk he wore like cologne. My mother touched Dad's arm as if to say enough, but he was already raising his glass. "To retirement, to legacy, to family." I stood up so slowly I felt every vertebrae. "Excuse me," I murmured, though no one was really looking, not even him. My chair scraped against the flagstone with a sound like protest. I walked past the tiki torches and citronella candles, down the slate steps into the side garden, where the music dulled and the laughter faded. My heels sank slightly into the grass, grounding me as I leaned against a tree and pressed cold fingers to my cheeks. "Don't cry, not here." I had made peace with being the quiet one, the dependable one, the sister who showed up early, stayed late, remembered birthdays, and took Mom to her appointments. But I guess being steady doesn't earn you a construction company. That line, "Teaching's not a real profession anyway," it didn't just hurt. It unraveled something I hadn't realized was barely holding together. I thought about my students, how they looked up at me like I held the keys to the universe. How I wiped tears, tied shoes, mediated fights over crayons, and stayed late planning lessons that made 6-year-olds believe they could do anything. But none of that mattered to my own father. Invisibility doesn't always arrive in a single blow. Sometimes it's built over decades of being overlooked, of hearing, "That's nice," while your brother's every move is a drum roll. But tonight, it felt different. Like someone had finally said aloud what I'd always feared was true. My worth didn't register. I stayed in the garden until the speech ended and the claps died down, until I heard Mom calling for the cake to be brought out. That's when I quietly slipped away, out the side gate, toward my car parked 2 houses down. No one noticed, not even Jake, and that, somehow, hurt the most. The next morning, I sat in my usual seat at Marlowe's Cafe, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug of hazelnut coffee, trying not to replay the party in my head. But every time I blinked, I heard my father's voice again. "Teaching's not a real profession anyway." "Earth to Linda," said Kayla, nudging my elbow gently. "You've been stirring that sugar packet for 3 straight minutes." I blinked, looked around. The cafe was its usual charming self. Brick walls lined with bookshelves, mismatched chairs, soft indie music playing just loud enough to fill the silence. My friends, 3 fellow kindergarten teachers and 1 special ed assistant, were already halfway through their scones. Sorry, I muttered. Rough night. Monique raised an eyebrow. Let me guess, Jake, I nodded, exhaling. My dad officially handed him the company in front of everyone, then said I paused. He said teaching's not a real profession. They all froze. Oh no, he didn't, whispered Jenna, her freckles standing out against her blush of indignation. Girl, muttered Monique, crossing her arms. Your dad needs a timeout, preferably in a room full of 5-year-olds with glitter glue. They all laughed. I smiled barely. Their outrage made something tighten in my chest, relief maybe, recognition. You know what hurts the most, I said, voice quieter now. It wasn't just what he said, it was how proud he looked giving everything to Jake, like that was his legacy, and me, I was background noise. You're not background, Kayla said firmly. You're the one kids run to when their parents forget lunch. The one who stays after school cleaning up science experiments gone wrong. You're the only reason half our students know how to read by spring. Monique pointed her spoon at me. You're the one who got that selective speech delay kid to talk, remember that? That boy didn't speak for 3 months until you figured out he liked dinosaurs. Because she wore that ridiculous T-Rex headband, Jenna added, laughing. I laughed too, finally. Hey, that headband worked. There was a pause, a warmth settling between us as the memory softened the sting of last night. Then Kayla leaned in, voice low and earnest. What do you really want, Linda? Not what your dad wants, not what Jake inherited. You. The question lingered in the air like steam from our coffee cups. I hesitated. I've never said it out loud, I admitted. Say it now, Jenna urged, her eyes kind. I took a breath. I want to open my own preschool. The words landed with surprising weight. My heart raced. For a second, I wondered if they'd laugh, if they'd say it was unrealistic, but they didn't. Monique's face lit up. Girl, that makes so much sense. Kayla clapped her hands. Of course you do. You've practically been running hours already. Jenna nodded. You've always had that vision thing, like when we were still using those outdated worksheets and you brought in sensory bins and outdoor story time. I mean, look around, Monique added. The city's full of daycares that treat kids like numbers. You'd actually build a place where kids feel seen, heard, safe. Their support landed in my chest like sun on frost. I've thought about it for years, I confessed, but I don't have the money or a business degree or, confidence. You've got something better, Kayla said. You've got purpose. And grit, Monique added. And taste in child-friendly daycare, Jenna said with a wink. Which is more important than people realize. We laughed again. The waitress brought more coffee. A soft indie cover of Landslide played from the speakers, and I felt a shift inside me, subtle but definite. For the first time, my dream felt less like a secret fantasy and more like a plan, a possibility. I'd have to start small, I said, already picturing it. Maybe rent a little commercial space, paint murals, use second-hand furniture, build it with my own hands. Let us help, Kayla said. We'll spread the word, bring families. Paint walls, Monique grinned. I'm great with an Allen wrench. IKEA furniture quakes in fear when I walk into the room. The cafe glowed around us, warm wood, twinkle lights, soft laughter from nearby tables. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt seen, not as someone's daughter, not as someone's sister. As someone, just me, Linda, dreamer, builder, believer. Okay, I whispered, barely daring to believe it. Maybe I can actually do this. The first time I held the keys, my hands were shaking. It was a gray-walled shoebox of a space on a sleepy side street in Aurora, about 20 minutes from Denver. Nothing fancy, just a squat building with faded stucco, a cracked front window, and a flickering, for lease sign someone forgot to take down. But when the realtor handed me the keys and said, "It's yours now," I felt something bloom behind my ribs, something wild and enormous. Hope. I'd sold my grandmother's old apartment, the one I'd inherited after she passed and hadn't touched since the funeral. I think part of me had been holding on to it because letting it go meant accepting she was really gone. But I remembered how she used to call me Little Miss Future, and I could almost hear her voice when I signed the papers. Go make something of your own, baby girl. So I did. The commercial space wasn't glamorous, but it was zoned for childcare. And it came with a tiny back room I could live in, barely the size of a walk-in closet, but big enough for a futon, a hot plate, and dreams too big for 4 walls. That first week was chaos. I traded in my heels for sneakers and bought a second-hand toolbox that I named Martha. If you've ever met a drill that misbehaves, you know why it needs a stern-sounding name. My hands blistered. My back ached. My knees cracked like bubble wrap every time I stood up from scrubbing another stain out of the baseboards. The old carpet reeked of dust and mystery. I ripped it up myself, tile by tile, sweating under the dim overhead lights. Every morning, I'd roll off my futon, still smelling of paint fumes and cheap hand soap, and whisper to the empty walls, "We're gonna be something." I painted the walls sky blue. Not just any blue, hope blue. I sketched cheerful murals. A sun with a smiling face, animals reading books under trees, a trail of alphabet letters winding along the wall like a caterpillar. The air smelled like possibility and Glades clean linen because that's all I could afford from the dollar store. I ate peanut butter on toast for breakfast, canned soup for dinner, rice and beans for days. Every cent had gone into down payments, licensing paperwork, fire inspection fees, and toy catalogs where even a basic tricycle cost more than I'd spent on groceries that week. But I wasn't afraid. Not really. Because every evening when I turned off the construction light and sat cross-legged on the cold floor, I could see it. The kids running barefoot through the playroom. The parents sipping coffee in the tiny welcome nook. The bulletin board covered in crayon drawings and glitter art. The kind of place that feels like a second home. The kind I had needed when I was 5 and shy and scared of loud noises. Some nights I cried from exhaustion. One night I cried because I dropped a can of yellow paint and it splattered across the alphabet wall like a crime scene. I sat there sobbing into a roll of paper towels, laughing and crying at the same time because it looked like Big Bird exploded. I painted a banana over it. Problem solved. But every day I pushed forward. I had a vision. And it was mine. No one gave it to me. No one handed it over at a party with a speech. I was building it with my own 2 hands, blistered and shaky and strong. One night, as I curled into my futon with a hoodie for a blanket, I whispered to the ceiling, "This is going to work. It has to." I didn't know then that the hardest part hadn't even begun, that I would soon face silence, rejection, and nights where the only sound was my own heart breaking. But that would come later. For now, I was just a woman in a paint-stained sweatshirt, falling asleep under the glow of a mural sun, wrapped in purpose. And in that moment, that was enough. I was ankle-deep in scraps of foam and half-built cubbies when the knock came. 3 short raps on the glass door. Firm, unhesitant. The kind that says, "I know this place is half a mess, but I'm walking in anyway." I wiped the sweat off my forehead with the sleeve of my paint-stained sweatshirt and peeked through the window, squinting past the smudge of yellow finger paint someone me had forgotten to clean. There, standing on the cracked front step, was a face I hadn't seen in years, Mrs. Devon, my old principal, tall as ever. Gray hair swept back into her signature chignon, a clipboard in one hand, and behind her, a truck, a literal truck. I opened the door and stared. "Mrs. Devon." "Linda Greer," she said, eyes sweeping the space behind me. "You always did color outside the lines." I laughed, startled by how good it felt to see her. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped inside, taking slow, deliberate steps like a general surveying a battlefield. "I heard you left Westbrook," she said, "that you were up to something bold." I nodded, embarrassed suddenly by the chipped floor tiles and the unfinished mural I'd meant to fix this morning but had instead used as a shelf for glue sticks. "It's early," I said, gesturing around. "I'm still building." She turned, appraising me with that same thoughtful gaze she used to give when you tried something risky in your lesson plan. Not judging, just waiting to see what you'd do next. "I retired last year," she said. "Didn't know what to do with myself. Spent most of the summer cleaning out the storage rooms at the school." She paused. "Then I heard about what you were doing, from Kayla, I think, or Monique, doesn't matter." She pointed her clipboard toward the truck. "Come outside." Still confused, I followed her. She opened the back of the truck with a clatter and my knees nearly gave out. It was full, packed, stacked to the ceiling, used toys carefully cleaned and sorted, bins of art supplies, laminated letter sets, sensory bins, dollhouse furniture, row of well-loved picture books, and in the very back a wooden cubby wall. The kind no one makes anymore. My throat closed up. I figured, she said almost casually, you might be able to make better use of these than the district's surplus warehouse. I turned to her, blinking hard. You brought all this for me, she shrugged. I always knew you'd build something, just didn't think it'd be with a wrench instead of a whiteboard. I laughed through the tears. Mrs. Devon, I don't even know what to say. Say thank you, she said dryly, though her eyes were soft. And then grab the other side of this bin before I pull my back out. We spent the next 2 hours unloading the truck. She moved like a woman half her age, directing traffic as I rolled out rugs, organized bins, and set up a reading nook that looked like something out of a Pinterest dream. When we carried the cubby wall inside, scarred, warm, and smelling faintly of dry oak, something in the room shifted. It felt anchored now. Real. A place where children would hang their backpacks and tuck their drawings. A place that could hold dreams. When the last bin was inside, Mrs. Devon wiped her hands on her khakis and gave me a firm nod. You've got the bones, Linda. Now fill it with heart. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and don't forget to register for your state inspection. I heard a rumor they're moving the deadline up. I nodded, still stunned. After she drove away, I stood in the center of the playroom, surrounded by hand-me-down magic, and let the tears fall. Not from sadness. Not from fear, from gratitude. That someone still believed in me enough to show up. That someone saw my scrappy dream and said, yes, this matters. That maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this after all. I sat on the rug, picked up a worn copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and whispered to the empty room, look, we have a library now. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was building something from nothing. I was building toward something, and it was beautiful. For a place designed to hold laughter, the silence was deafening. Each morning, I'd unlock the door with a flicker of hope and a flutter in my stomach. I'd straighten the reading pillows, set out puzzles on the play tables, and pour myself a cup of instant coffee in the corner kitchenette I'd painted mint green. By 7:30 a.m., I'd flip the open for enrollment sign in the window and press play on the soft playlist I made for morning drop-offs. But no one came. Not at 8, not at 10, not at noon. The first week I told myself it was just timing. Back to school chaos, maybe. Parents adjusting to routines. Flyers take time. Algorithms are slow. The second week, the optimism cracked. I watched as parents passed by on the sidewalk, glancing at my bright starts early learning sign with vague curiosity, and then kept walking. One woman even took a photo of the mural, smiled, and walked straight into the Starbucks 2 doors down. My inbox stayed empty. My phone stayed silent. I refreshed the Facebook ad dashboard obsessively. 3 clicks, no conversions. I sent out flyers, hundreds of them. Pinned them on community boards, slid them under cafe doors, left stacks at the pediatrician's office. Nothing. I began living on rice and beans, switching out my usual morning bagel for a spoonful of peanut butter on a cracker. I canceled my Spotify premium. Stopped driving unless absolutely necessary. My savings, which had never been large to begin with, drained like water through cracked hands. Some nights I lay awake on the futon, staring at the mural of animals reading books under the tree and wondering if I'd been foolish to dream this big. I mean, what if my dad had been right? What if teaching wasn't a real profession? What if I had mistaken purpose for value, passion for practicality? The questions came like weeds, quiet, persistent, and impossible to pull out by the root. I tried everything. Added a first-month free banner to the window. Filmed a video tour and posted it online. Offered free trial visits, a parent Q&A night, no one came. Even toy donation bins for local families. Still nothing. Each day, I'd open the front door, turn on the lights, and pretend it wasn't tearing me apart inside. I'd mop the same spotless floor, restack the same untouched books, rearrange block towers in hopes that tomorrow someone's child would knock them over with joy. I called Monique one night just to hear a familiar voice. I feel like I opened a restaurant and forgot to invite anyone, I confessed, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. You didn't forget, she said gently. They just haven't found you yet. But what if they never do? Monique was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I remember when you taught that little boy, Marcus, The one who screamed every time someone touched his backpack. Yeah, you didn't give up on him. You sat next to him every day for a month, just drawing pictures until he trusted you enough to say your name. My throat tightened. This is different. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe this is just the drawing pictures part. After we hung up, I sat in the half-lit room with a half-drunk cup of tea and tried to imagine a full classroom. Tried to hear laughter instead of my own thoughts. Tried to remember why I started this. It wasn't for money. It wasn't for pride. It was for the kids no one sees until they're too loud or too much or too late. It was for the quiet ones, the messy ones, the funny ones who hide behind their mom's leg. It was for them, even if none of them had arrived yet. Still, the silence was getting harder to ignore, and I was running out of both time and money. I didn't want to go back, not because I didn't love teaching, I did, but because returning felt like retreating. Like I was tucking my tail between my legs and crawling back to the comfort I swore I'd grow beyond. But comfort isn't failure. And when your bank account stares back at you with $86.14, humility starts sounding a lot like wisdom. I reached out to Ms. Alvarez, the assistant principal at Westbrook Elementary. She'd always been kind. Within 24 hours, she emailed me back. We can't offer full-time right now, but our afternoon pre-K slot is open. The kids would love to see you again, so I took it. 3 days a week, 1 p.m. to 4:30. Enough to scrape together grocery money and cover utilities. Not enough to give up on my dream, but enough to keep me afloat while I figured out how not to drown in it. The first day back was surreal. The halls smelled like disinfectant and pencil shavings. I passed my old classroom and instinctively reached for keys that weren't mine anymore. But then something unexpected. Miss Linda. Small voice, high and familiar. I turned. A little boy stood in the hallway, backpack slung lopsided, eyes wide. Then he ran to me full speed and flung his arms around my waist. Jason, I gasped, heart catching. He'd been in my class 2 years ago, quiet, sensitive, with a laugh like rain. You're back, he said. I told Mommy you'd come back. His mom appeared behind him, smiling shyly. We still have the class photo on our fridge, she said. He talks about you all the time. I didn't know what to say. My throat was already full. Later that day, while helping a group of pre-K kids match socks during center time, another parent peeked through the doorway. Miss Linda, she whispered. It was Ava's mom, Ava, the little girl who used to cry every morning at drop-off until I started leaving her handwritten notes in her cubby, one for each day. I just wanted to say thank you, she said softly. Ava still keeps those notes in a box under her bed. She calls it her brave letters. She said if she ever feels scared, she reads one. I didn't get a chance to say this before, but you changed things for her. I stood there in the middle of a sock-matching table, surrounded by crayon stains and giggles, and felt something strange rise in me. Pride. Not the loud kind. Not the kind you wear like armor. The quiet kind. The kind that fills in cracks you didn't realize were still bleeding. By the end of the week, I'd run into 4 former students, 6 parents, and 2 teachers who greeted me like I'd returned from a long trip instead of just a few months away. And then came the moment that broke me. A little boy I didn't recognize shuffled up to me as I was organizing books on Friday afternoon. Are you the teacher that draws letters like balloons? I blinked. I guess I am. He held out a crumpled piece of paper. A stick figure version of me, bun, glasses, and all with the words, I wish you were still my teacher. I knelt down slowly. What's your name, sweetheart? Leo, he said. Well, Leo, I whispered, swallowing the ache in my chest, this is the best drawing I've seen in a long time. He beamed. Can you teach me the R next time? It's hard. You bet. As he skipped away, the paper still warm in my hand, I sat down at the reading circle and just breathed. Maybe I wasn't building an empire yet. Maybe the dream I'd started wasn't roaring to life like I thought it would. But the impact, it was still echoing. And even if I had to stack blocks in a half-day classroom while handing out stickers and gluing googly eyes, I hadn't disappeared. Not in the ways that mattered. It was a Thursday morning, the kind where the air tastes like change, crisp, restless, uncertain. I was kneeling on the nap room floor, wrestling with a stubborn corner of foam mat that refused to lie flat when the doorbell rang. Not the mailman, not the landlord. The front doorbell. I froze. No one ever rang the bell. Flyers had brought no one. Ads had brought no one. And after weeks of nothing but echoes, I'd stopped flinching at silence. But this was a knock from the universe. I hurried to the front, smoothing my shirt instinctively, palms clammy. Through the dusty glass, I saw them, 3 women. Different ages, different energy, all holding toddlers' hands or balancing them on hips. My heart stuttered. I opened the door, unsure whether to speak or just stare. "Hi," said the one in the middle. Short, sharp ponytail, a smile like she didn't believe in small talk. "Are you still taking kids?" I blinked. "Yes, yes, always." The woman on the right laughed. "You're Miss Linda Wright from Westbrook." I nodded, still unsure if this was real. "I'm Grayson's mom," she said. "You taught him last year. He wouldn't stop crying unless you sang the lizard song." My jaw dropped. Grayson. Oh my gosh, he's in 1st grade now. Yep, and he still talks about you. Every time we pass this street, he says, "That's where Miss Linda lives now." The 3rd woman stepped forward, shifting a chubby baby from one side to the other. "My sister's daughter was in your class. She says you made her feel brave." I swallowed hard. "I was at the library yesterday," the ponytail mom continued. "Some of the parents were talking. Someone mentioned you'd opened a preschool. We figured we'd come see." I blinked again, then stepped aside. "Come in." They walked through like curious explorers, heads swiveling, kids toddling, feet sticking slightly to the freshly mopped floor. The nap room still smelled like lemon cleaner. The reading nook was lit by a single soft lamp. The murals were finished, now sky blue, sun beaming, giraffes reading comic books. I gave them the tour, words coming faster than I could catch them. "Here's the art corner. This is the music shelf. We do group snack here, family style. And yes, we're licensed. CPR certified, background checked. I live in the back room temporarily, so I'm always nearby. Always." They didn't laugh, they didn't flinch. They nodded, listened, smiled. The baby clapped at the mural. One of the toddlers climbed into the beanbag like he belonged there. The other found a wooden puzzle and began clicking pieces into place, tongue poking from the side of his mouth like tiny concentration. "So," ponytail mom said, hands on hips, "you got space." I looked around at the empty cubbies. Too much space. I smiled. "Yes, I've got space." We sat on the floor and talked about hours and fees and snacks without added sugar. I offered a trial day. They didn't need it. "I trust you," Grayson's mom said. "We all do." As they left, I walked them to the door. Before stepping out, the baby's mom turned and said, "You said you live in the back room." I nodded. She glanced over her shoulder at the cozy chaos behind her. "You won't be back there long." And then they were gone, leaving the scent of baby's shampoo and the echo of laughter behind. I sank into the beanbag chair and stared at the 3 tiny footprints someone had left on the tile. Not 1, 3, not someday, today. I looked around the room, still humble, still worn, but for the first time it felt full, alive. And all I could think was, I'm not alone anymore. The first payment came in cash, folded 10s and 5s, tucked in an envelope with a sticker that read, "Thank you for being kind to my kid." I pressed it to my heart before sliding it into the little lockbox I kept under the desk. 3 kids became 5 by the end of the week. I added extra crayons to the art shelf, baked banana muffins from scratch, and even printed "Welcome to Bright Start's" name tags with curly fonts and smiling suns. It wasn't just happening, it was real. Until the pipe burst. I was kneeling in the nap room, smoothing tiny blankets onto plastic cots when the cold squelch of my sock stopped me. Water, I stood. My foot left a wet print behind. At first, I thought maybe a child spilled their water bottle. But then I heard it, a slow, relentless drip coming from the corner. I ran to the bathroom. The floor was slick. A pipe beneath the sink, wrapped in old tape and rust, had finally given up. Water seeped down the hall, inching like dread toward everything I'd built. I froze. Then I ran, towels, mops, a bucket, anything to hold the tide back. I moved like a woman possessed, slipping on the wet tile, catching myself with an elbow that bruised instantly. I unplugged the bookshelf lights, scooped up bean bags, and prayed out loud to no one in particular. Please, please, not the nap room. But it was too late. By the time I blocked the water off, the back corner was soaked. 3 nap mats were ruined. The rug smelled like mildew. My mural, my beautiful alphabet caterpillar, had water lines lapping at its tail. I sat down in the doorway, drenched and shaking. I didn't cry, not at first. I just stared at the water like it had personally betrayed me. An hour later, when the plumber gave me the quote, $430 for the fix minimum, I felt something shift in my chest. A crack I hadn't patched yet. A thread pulling loose. I opened my banking app. $17.24. That's all that stood between me and disaster. I thanked the plumber, said I'd get back to him, and hung up. Then I curled into the beanbag chair in the dry part of the room and let the tears come. Not the sobbing kind. Not this time. Just quiet, endless drops like the pipe, honestly. Slow, steady, and unable to stop themselves. I'd done everything right. I'd built it with my hands. I'd painted walls with love. I'd fed children with food I couldn't afford. I'd stayed up late filing forms, writing lesson plans, and believing that goodness would be enough. And now I couldn't afford to stop a leak. Maybe my dream wasn't just naive, it was ridiculous. But then I thought of Leo's drawing, of Ava's brave letters, of the way one little girl had hugged her mom's leg and whispered, "I like it here, it smells like stories." I wiped my face. I'd built something worth saving. So I picked up the phone and applied for a microloan through a nonprofit a teacher friend had once mentioned. I didn't know if I'd get it. Didn't know if the next leak would be in my roof or my heart, but I applied anyway, because this dream had already flooded me once, and I wasn't going to let it drown me now. The first sign things were turning around wasn't dramatic. It was a voicemail. A woman's voice, warm and a little breathless. "Hi, I got your number from a friend, Kayla, I think. She said your preschool saved her sanity. I just moved into the neighborhood. Do you have space for a 3-year-old who never naps and thinks glitter is a food group?" I played the message twice, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. Then I called her back with shaking fingers and a smile I couldn't wipe off my face for hours. The second sign came 2 days later. A father in a work uniform knocked on the door. "My sister said you're the lady who teaches kids how to be brave," he said, holding a small boy who clung to his neck like a koala. "You got room for one more?" Within a month, I had 8 full-time children enrolled and a waiting list of 3. I hired a part-time assistant named Rosa, young, bright, and endlessly patient with the children who asked 37 questions before breakfast. She loved glitter and frogs and knew how to make balloon animals out of nothing but construction paper and hope. The day Rosa arrived, I moved out of the back room and into a shared apartment 10 minutes away. It had creaky floors, a view of a parking lot, and a heater that hummed like a lullaby, but it had a real bed. I cried the first night I slept in it. Happy tears, exhausted tears, grateful ones. Business was still modest but steady. Parents told their friends, who told their cousins, who whispered to coworkers at the grocery store. Suddenly, Bright Starts wasn't just a sign on a small street in Aurora. It was a name passed from one family to another like a secret recipe. One afternoon, I opened my email and gasped. It was from a parenting blogger. She'd heard about my center through a Facebook group and wanted to come see the magic herself. I thought it was a prank until she showed up the next week with a notebook, a camera, and a toddler on her hip. She called it a pocket-sized paradise for tiny humans. I printed that line and taped it on the wall behind the welcome desk. More applications came in, more tiny coats on hooks, more laughter in the nap room, more glitter stuck in the cracks of the floorboards. I bought a new bookshelf, then a better play kitchen, then a set of dress-up clothes that made every child feel like royalty. Rosa and I started joking about location number 2 like it was a fairy tale. But sometimes, on quiet mornings before the doors opened, I'd sit in the reading corner with my coffee and just look around. At the cubbies, the sunshine-colored rugs, the mural of the caterpillar alphabet, still bearing the faded yellow stain I never fully covered up. I didn't need a second location to feel like I'd made it. Because here, right here, was proof that dreams stitched with small, stubborn hope could outlive the silence. One afternoon, Rosa caught me lingering in the doorway while the kids painted rainbow volcanoes. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, just thinking. "About what?" I looked at the room, at the chaos, the love, the work. About how this all started with nothing but tears, paint, and a pipe that betrayed me. Rosa grinned. And now, I said, we're building more than a preschool. Thanksgiving came with cinnamon in the air and tension in my chest. It had been a full year since the backyard party, the one where Dad handed Jake the family company like a golden trophy and tossed me a joke about crayons. And yet, somehow, here we were again, seated at the same long dining table, pretending the turkey masked what we didn't say. Mom had set everything just right. The place cards, the napkin rings, the little candles that smelled like clove and memory. She smiled too brightly when I walked in, hugging me as if that could make up for 12 months of silence. Jake arrived late, of course, with a new watch, a louder laugh, and a sports car so shiny it practically did its own introductions. He tossed his keys on the entry table like someone tossing a trophy. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "Had to pick up the Beamer. Finally got the rims I wanted." I smiled, small and steady. "Still driving my Honda. Gets me where I need to go." He chuckled. "Hey, if it runs." No one said anything. Mom cleared her throat. "Linda, how's your little school?" "Little," I took a sip of wine. "It's growing." Dad didn't look up. He was too focused on carving the turkey as if the perfect slice would distract him from acknowledging me. "I heard," Jake said, smirking as he passed the mashed potatoes. "You've got, what, 8 kids now? 10. Cute. Like a babysitting co-op, huh?" I smiled again, tighter this time. "No," I said. "It's a licensed early learning center with a wait list and a staff of 3. But yes, we do have snack time." Jake laughed, nudging Dad. "She always had a sense of humor." Dad still didn't look at me. It used to break me, his silence. The way he could look past me like I was wallpaper. The way Jake's mockery always landed like truth in his eyes. But not tonight, not this year. Because while they measured success in horsepower and hedge funds, I'd measured it in first steps, brave letters, glitter smiles, and the quiet certainty of children who felt safe in a world I'd built from scratch. Jake passed the cranberry sauce with exaggerated care. "Well, we all play to our strengths. I build real things. You babysit." I set my wineglass down, slow and deliberate. I didn't raise my voice, didn't roll my eyes. Just looked him dead in the face and said, "I teach children how to love learning, how to speak up, how to be kind in a world that rarely models it. I help parents go to work knowing their child is safe, seen, and understood. If you think that's babysitting, Jake, then maybe you should sit in my classroom for one day and see who really runs the world." The room went quiet. Mom looked at her lap. Dad paused mid-carve. Jake blinked. I picked up my fork and kept eating. They didn't know that just yesterday. A mother had hugged me in the doorway and cried because her nonverbal son said thank you for the first time. They didn't know I'd helped a little girl with separation anxiety go a whole day without tears. They didn't know I'd just approved plans for a second location. But I did. And for the first time, their opinions didn't feel like facts. Just noise. I didn't need to convince anyone anymore. I was building something real. They just hadn't seen it yet. I heard about Jake's business collapse from a parent. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was gluing googly eyes onto paper owls when Rosa poked her head into the craft room. "Did you see the news?" "No," I said, wiping glue off my hands. "What happened?" She held up her phone. A headline. "Jake Greer & Co. files for emergency dissolution after investment fallout." My stomach didn't drop. It didn't leap either. It just stilled. Like something long rattling inside me had finally settled into silence. I read the article twice. His commercial properties had tanked. Something about a luxury housing project that ran out of funding and spiraled into lawsuits. Half his assets were frozen. Liquidation imminent. And there, buried in a paragraph, was the line that changed everything. The company's remaining assets will be auctioned next quarter to cover outstanding debts. I sat down at the tiny art table, surrounded by tiny chairs, and stared at the sentence like it was in another language. Auctioned, which meant available. I pulled out my laptop that night and stayed up until 2 a.m. combing through court filings and bankruptcy documents, tracing every line that could lead me to a single, powerful idea. I could buy it, not to save it, to rebuild it, on my terms, not because I wanted revenge, not really, but because that company was supposed to be ours, Jake's and mine. It was my grandfather's legacy before it was ever Jake's toy. I grew up sorting invoices at that office, sweeping the lobby floors on Saturdays while Dad taught Jake how to hold a handshake like a man. They forgot I was watching. They forgot I was listening. But I remembered everything. And now I had something they didn't. A plan. I contacted a lawyer the next day. Told him I was interested in placing a bid once the assets were listed. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing, just nodded and slid me a form. The down payment would be significant, but thanks to my growing preschool, some scrappy saving, and a small business grant I'd quietly applied for 6 months ago, I had just enough to put down a stake. It wasn't a flashy bid. It wouldn't turn heads, but it was serious. I signed the paperwork with hands that didn't shake. Not anymore. That night I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by sketches for my second preschool location, plans drawn in Sharpie and hope, and whispered to the quiet, "I'm not doing this to prove them wrong." I looked at the bid packet, thick and official in its manila envelope. "I'm doing this to prove me right." The next week passed like a storm behind glass. Jake's world unraveled. News articles, financial analysts, social media posts dissecting his fall like it was sport. I didn't gloat. I didn't share the headlines. I just kept building. Rosa and I picked out colors for the second location. I met with architects, ran ratios, scanned zoning codes and fire inspections like bedtime stories, and then a call, my lawyer. "Your bid was accepted. You're the official buyer pending final signatures." I closed my eyes and exhaled a sound that didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was happening. I was going to own the company, not the company that pushed me out. The company I would transform. From old greed to new growth, from a monument to legacy to a tribute to future, to children, to learning, to me, the girl who painted caterpillars on walls and believed in something bigger than profit margins. I stood in front of my closet, staring at my usual flats and cardigans. Then I walked to the store and bought a sleek black suit and a pair of heels, and just for good measure, red lipstick. If I was signing the future, I was walking in like I owned it. Because now I did. I pulled into the parking lot 10 minutes early. The Mercedes was a rental, sleek, silver, humming beneath my hands like it belonged to a different version of me. The kind of woman who'd never been laughed at over Thanksgiving dinner. The kind who wasn't invisible at backyard parties. But I wasn't pretending. Not anymore. I stepped out slowly, heels clicking against the pavement, blazer catching the wind just enough to feel like a cape. The sun was sharp, the sky impossibly blue. Let them see me, let them wonder. The law firm where the signing was taking place sat in a polished building downtown, glass, chrome, and echoes. My lawyer met me in the lobby with a nod. He didn't say, "Are you sure?" or "This is a big move." He just handed me a coffee and said, "They're waiting upstairs." Jake was already in the conference room when I walked in, slumped in the leather chair across from the long, shining table. No suit jacket, tie loosened, eyes tired in a way that went beyond sleep. He looked up and his jaw stalled mid-motion. "Linda," his voice was rough, disoriented. "Morning," I said calmly, setting my bag down beside my seat. He blinked, straightened slightly. What are you doing here?" My lawyer was already opening the file. "She's here to sign, she's the buyer." Jake laughed. A small, confused, desperate laugh. No way, that's impossible. You don't, how did you even?" I met his gaze. "I built something, Jake. While you were golfing with investors and betting on glass condos, I was building futures. Quietly, carefully, one child at a time." He shook his head. "But why would you buy this?" I paused, holding his eyes. "Because it should have been mine, too. And because I won't let what's left of it fall into hands that don't know what to do with it. You don't even know how to run a company like this." "I didn't know how to open a school either," I said, signing the first page. "And yet here we are." He fell silent. The documents slid in front of me one after the other, signature after signature. Every stroke of ink felt like a chapter closing and another cracking open. The firm's partner cleared his throat. "This includes the office lease, the vehicles, the name, the remaining real estate, and the employment contract." Jake stiffened. "What employment contract?" The lawyer glanced down at the final document. "Part of the asset transition includes retaining key personnel for a 6-month consultative period." Jake's eyes widened. You want me to work for you? I leaned back, folding my hands in my lap. No, Jake, I don't want you to. I just believe in finishing what we start. You know, the kind of value Dad used to preach at us. Jake looked toward the window, blinking fast. Across the room, Dad sat still, silent, watching. He'd come in halfway through the meeting, unannounced, uninvited, but no one stopped him. Of course they didn't. He was the past that still cast a shadow. Now, for the first time, he spoke. You did this with preschools, I turned to him. I did this with grit and glue sticks, and children who told their parents, Miss Linda taught me I'm smart. He nodded slowly, no apology, but no dismissal either. Just acknowledgement. I didn't need more. The final document slid toward me. I signed. Jake stood abruptly, face flushed. You'll regret this. I already regret not believing in myself sooner, I replied quietly. He stormed out. The door closed behind him with a hollow click, and then there was just silence. Soft, satisfying, I gathered my bag, walked out of the building, and let the sun hit my face like applause. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anyone else's approval. I was owning my future. Page by page, child by child, brick by brick. A year later, the first snowfall dusted the playground outside Bright Starts 4. It wasn't in Denver, or Aurora, or any of the neighborhoods I used to daydream from. It was in Boulder, a little stone building with blue shutters, tucked between a bakery and a yoga studio. Parents called it the one with the mural of the flying books. I still painted the murals myself. It was the last thing I insisted on doing solo. Because no matter how many teachers I hired, how many parents joined wait lists, how many articles came out about the educator who bought her brother's company, this part, the walls, the whimsy, the message had to come from me. And in that mural, every child soared. 4 locations, 24 staff, hundreds of little shoes in cubbies and sippy cups lined up like soldiers. Sometimes I stood in the doorway and watched it all like a film I didn't remember auditioning for. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was shaping something bigger than anything I ever thought I deserved. Dad came by last week, not to criticize, not to dismiss, just to help. He walked through the back office of the building I now owned, the one where he once taught Jake how to run things, and asked if I needed help with the filing system. I almost laughed. But then he said, "You were always more organized than both of us," and started sorting the invoices without another word. He didn't apologize for the past, but he stayed for 3 hours and brought coffee the next day. Jake comes too sometimes, not with swagger or keys to flashy cars, but with spreadsheets. He manages vendor logistics now, quiet, efficient, dependable. He doesn't brag, doesn't crack jokes at my expense. Once he came into my office holding a clipboard and said, "Enrollment in Boulder's at capacity through March. You thinking of a 5th?"